Morning, everyone. This is our fourth panel for the Mass Timber Office Forum, Best Practice in Construction. So welcome. We've got a great panel lined up again today. I'm just going to give you a brief overview of what we're going to talk about, and then we'll get straight into introducing our panel. So the normal agenda, we've got the Q&A, and then I'll introduce our next session. So if we can go straight into introducing the panel, that'd be good. This session obviously follows our insurance panel, our fire panel, and our sustainability panel. All are on video links, so if you haven't seen those, you can go into those links and have a look at those. But Ollie, over to you to introduce our panel today. Thank you.
A very good morning to you all, and welcome to session 4 in our Mass Timber Commercial Office Forum series entitled Best Practice in Construction. In the series so far, we have heard from several key stakeholder groups. In session 1, we spoke to several key decision makers from some of the largest global insurance organisations. In session 2, we discussed fire testing and building control with well-respected experts and academics in their fields. And in our last session, we assembled a number of well-regarded individuals on the topic of sustainability and the role mass timber has to play in helping us reach net carbon zero and its impact on health and well-being to the end users. And so to today we will hear from our builders and our constructors, the people and organisations who have, are and will assemble our mass timber and hybrid offices of the future. Within the hour, we will try to cover a myriad of topics that need to be considered during construction, such as fire precautions, preventing and dealing with water ingress, obtaining project insurances, health and safety, and working with mass timber in practice, to name but a few. So to our panellists who come from organisations we're sure you'll all know very well. David Smith is a project director at Lendlease on the iconic Google project, KGX1. In terms of KGX1, many of you will have seen the steel and CLT frame on this iconic landscraper office that is being erected near King's Cross, and will have seen images of the proposed timber stick facade in the press. David is a vastly experienced project manager with a solid engineering background and 25 years of experience in 3 countries, South Africa, Ireland, and the UK. He has extensive practical and management experience in the commercial, residential, retail, and healthcare sectors. He has recently become a chartered engineer through the Institution of Civil Engineers, and he has a particular interest in alternative construction methods, hence the reason he's got into CLT. Graham Barber is construction director of the Major Projects Business Unit at Mace. Graham has a wealth of experience in delivering complex and challenging projects. Most recently, Graham was project director on the new Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Prior to this, he was project director on the Sky Campus redevelopment in Osterley, where he was responsible for delivering the Believe in Better building, Sky Central, and Health and Fitness Centre, all of which consisted of wholly timber and/or hybrid timber structures with large glulam and CLT mass timber elements. Steve Hearn is our next panellist, and is Chief Executive Officer for Midgroup. He was appointed as CEO this year, having been one of its founding directors in 2015. Midgroup was founded on the ethos that there is a better way of doing things in construction, and has MMC at the heart of everything it does, utilising timber construction across its portfolio of projects, an approach that has seen the business grow rapidly, now having over 250 million of secured work. Before joining Midgroup, Steve, a civil engineer from Loughborough University, held a number of senior operational positions, including project director at Laing O'Rourke. He has expertise in delivering projects in education, residential and commercial sectors. Midgroup's most current mass timber office project is the black and white building for the office group in Shoreditch, which is currently on site. An all timber office constructed from LVL, and CLT, including frame, cores and stairs. And to our next panellist, Keith Patrick is Head of Quality Development and Supply Chain Management at Graham. Keith has spent an eventful 25 years in construction, the majority of which has been with Graham. He has progressed through several site-based roles, including spending 12 years as project director, delivering major projects throughout the UK, before taking up his current role as head of quality development. He has a passion to support and assist his colleagues in tough environment of daily construction to deliver quality excellence, believing that we all need to continually re-educate ourselves on how to get the work right. Just some of the mass timber projects that Graham are involved with include Kingsgate Primary School in Camden, a REBA National Award winner in 2018, Ondel School, a private school, which had a CLT and glulam frame for a new sports centre completed in 2020. And I'm sure many of you have read in the press about 2 other particular projects that include extensions using mass timber, which include the old gramophone works in Kensal Rise, an office development, and Laser House near Barbican, the refurbished and part extension of an existing office using mass timber. Both examples, yet again, of the opportunities of combining mass timber buildings with older, more traditional built structures. This isn't just about building brand new hybrid buildings, it's about other opportunities too. And finally, but absolutely by no means least, Louisa Finley is Managing Director of Kier Construction Southern. Louisa joined Kier in 1988 during her degree course, gaining experience as an engineer on a large complex scheme for London Regional Transport in Acton. In the years to follow, she developed her managerial skills in a variety of construction sectors, including commercial offices, leisure facilities, education, healthcare, defence and residential schemes. Louisa was shortlisted for the CIOB Construction Manager of the Year award in 2005, in recognition of her achievements on the award-winning Grade 2 listed Crown Estate project in Whitehall, London, and won the Inspirational Leader Award at Atkins Inspire 2008. Before Matt gets us underway, the G&T would just like to thank all of our panellists for giving us their time in contributing to this forum, forming today's panel, and for giving us this important insight into their perspectives on mass timber and hybrid construction in commercial offices. Matt, over to you.
Thanks, Ollie. Thank you, panel. What a great panel we've got today. I'm really looking forward to this session. What we've tried to do with the questions here is split them into pre-construction and post-contract, broadly speaking. We have a poll question along the way, just to make sure that you're all with us and still awake. So we will get on with that. And don't forget that there's a chat function on the system for you to ask questions, and they'll be filtered through to me, and hopefully we'll have time for some live questions at the end. So before I forget to thank our panel at the end, I'll thank them now for their time, as Ollie's just done. So we'll get on with it, and we'll get straight into our Q&A. And our first question is, what are the key considerations for main contractors during the pre-construction and stroke procurement phase? So David, would you be able to pick that one up first for us?
Yeah, sure. Morning, everyone. So we discussed this briefly yesterday when we all met, just to run through things. And like every package, the key to the biggest success on a package is procuring it properly. So it's no different with CLT, and there are just certain things to look out for. Being on King's Cross and at the state we're at now, probably the one that springs to mind first is water management. And it's something we probably don't give enough weight to at procurement stage. It's actually such a difficult thing to do, because unless you are putting a temporary roof over what you're building, you can't keep the water out. So it's really how you deal with the water once it lands. So that's one of the main things I'd look at in procurement. The other things are your interfaces with your structure. So the CLT, it's like most things. The CLT itself as a panel, fantastic. It's just where it interfaces with the rest of the structure. In our case on this building, the interfaces are around steel columns and with steel beams. Generally all fine, but you do get probably your nodes where your columns and beams join, or your tricky bits. And that's not in terms of bearing, but really in terms of dynamics and in terms of acoustics. So the more developed you can be, the more you have your details flushed out, just like with everything else, the better chance you have of procuring the package well and having a smooth flow once you start your construction activities.
Fantastic. Graham, would you like to come in and add anything to that?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Yeah, I think other things around design and engineering are clearly stability, connections, as David's mentioned, thermal performance, and clearly what test data has been worked through in terms of fire engineering and how fire engineering's dealt with. I think another thing for me is the finish and what is being procured as a finish and how that is protected during the construction phase. I think the final things with certainly what we've seen in the market recently is hybrid structures and how we procure the supply chain, both in terms of the product, but also the installation sequence and how that is worked through. There's some discipline there that's required in in building these mass timber structures alongside other products.
Great, thank you for that. And Keith, any final words on that piece for us?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much indeed. I mean, I would echo what David had said. Really, whether a CLT or mass timber project is going to be a success or a struggle, 90% of that is determined before you get anywhere near site. And there's a number of things from our experience that we have found. Firstly, the design team, they need to be experienced, and that means not just a practice as a whole, but the actual people who are going to be employed in that, in particular the architect and the structural engineer. Have they had enough time to develop the design, especially if it's a cut and carve? We're doing a couple at the moment, and it is extremely important to ensure that if they have had a survey done, that it is actually a real and thorough survey, because if you don't do that, problems arise later on. It's how well advanced also is the design, especially on the M&E front for M&E openings, etc. And you must have really, really strict design freeze points where after that you cannot make any changes or your program will suffer. Also want to see, have we got the right CLT partner? So it's not just looking at their portfolio of work, but also investigating how well did that go, because we all know all projects get finished eventually, but it's how much pain you have to go through to actually get to that point. And then the final thing I would say is look at their financial stability and their capacity. Both things are incredibly important with a CLT or mass timber. The last thing you want is those people, their finances going south on you halfway through the project. So make sure, look at their cash position, look at what other work they've got on. In fact, we're finding we are actually getting investigated quite a bit by our, and we have been by our CLT partners, and they're looking at our finances, and thankfully we have no debt or anything like that. And that's what you're looking for in a CLT partner before you take them on. So probably those are the main things that come to mind in the pre-construction stroke procurement.
That's fantastic. I mean, I'm enjoying the session already. It's linking in the previous sessions we've had on fire and insurance and that sort of stuff already. So on that topic, just to bring Steve and Louisa in, how do you find obtaining insurances on mass timber projects? And is there anything that makes it more challenging or indeed easier than with other technologies? So Steve, do you want to pick that one up first?
Yeah, sure. There'll be a theme developing here, and it's been alluded to already about early engagement, and the insurance market's no different. Expecting the insurers suddenly to just jump and understand and know exactly what we do and what we intend to do is, yeah, it doesn't work. I mean, the point for us so far, I think, is that we haven't had any problems getting insurance. The market has shifted. The insurers will always tell you the market shifted and rates, everybody's seen rates go up, but I'm informed by the market that actually only that 10 to 20% of that rate increase is a response to fire, to timber, to the materials, and actually the rest of it is just market conditions. So the use of bulk timber, mass timber, is not the issue, and actually it's just making sure you get your insurers involved up front. They should be involved in the procurement. They should be involved in who you pick as your supply chain. What are insurers interested in? They want to see competency. They want to see credibility. They want to see track record. They want to know about fire. They want to know about water. They want to know about all of the things that the project will do to keep it safe. One of the things that I found quite sort of interesting was that the insurance market in the UK is quite often based on learning from abroad, quite often America, where the use of mass timber is limited and it's often stick build. You only got to look at US housing. And obviously when that gets damaged by fire or flood, it tends to be catastrophic, whereas the UK market is very, very different. So for me, insurance is all about education and early engagement and working with them to explain the procedures on the project. They don't know if we don't tell them.
That's a brilliant summary of our insurance panel, actually, the early engagement and the like. So thank you for that. Louisa, have you got anything to add on that?
No, very, very similar really to what Steve said, and I did catch up with our insurance department. It is all about early engagement and explaining how well the project's been planned. So if you understand, the programme, you understand how you're managing any risks, any proximity of other buildings. To date, they say there's been very few problems, but every project's taken on its own merits, and the better thought through and planned, the less problems you have.
Great. Okay. So linking in with that then, so how does the programming and logistics and general methodology and approach differ when working with mass timber in comparison to other more traditional forms of construction or other off-site systems? So David, could you pick that one up for us?
Yeah, sure. This, I think, for me, it's a good news story because if you compare CLT to a product like concrete or precast concrete panels, the constructions, if you plan it properly, as with everything, as everyone else has alluded to, it's actually a lot easier because you think about it, you bring your CLT panel in, you drop it in. If it's a steel frame, you probably have to do a bit of fixing, but then you're structurally sound after that, and you've got a platform to work off. So, you know, it's a lot less messy than concrete, a lot quicker, because once your frame's up and you drop your panel in it goes. And I think a lot more versatile, or a lot more flexible is probably the right word, than precast concrete. You know, at KGX1 we're doing precast and CLT, and you never have. I don't think a CLT panel's gone away on the whole job. So the panels come in. They might be a bit tricky getting in, but with a bit of work, you get your panels in, and off you go. So I think that's something to really look at. It's for me a real benefit of CLT. And probably one other thing just to consider when you think about all this is the size of your project. For a big project like Google, you're probably going to look at offsite storage because we've had to do it for various reasons. But if you've got several different types of products coming into the site that all have a different sequence and rely on each other, you want somewhere to store your materials because you're not always going to hit exactly the date that your shipment comes in. For a smaller project, I reckon just in time could work just fine.
Louisa, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, it really is all about the planning. It's really understanding your lead times, really planning deliveries, making sure you understand your lifting methodology, and understanding the interfaces. But we did a primary school quite a few years ago now, and actually, exactly as the others have said, it went up much quicker. We saw improved levels of safety because we had planned, you know, it was easier to make the building safe. And the interfaces with the building services, as long as they're managed well, because you do need the information and the full design for the building services as part of that pre-construction programme, it's a lot less easy to post-fit.
Okay, thank you. So we've hinted there at some of the pros and cons of building with mass timber, but I'll ask Keith first on this one. Do you just want to summarise some of the other pros and cons, Keith, on that? Keith, you're on mute, I think.
Apologies. Yeah, first of all, obviously the product, it looks great. There's no two ways about that. There's lower embodied carbon, the speed of construction, especially if you're using a full CLT system, that's much quicker. If you're just using it beams and columns, etc., there's not really a whole lot of difference from maybe steel construction or even concrete. You've got lower foundation costs because the mass weight of the building is slightly less, and then excellent acoustics on the product itself. Even though we will be talking a lot about fire, and I know you have talked about fire, it's inherently fire robust because of the char on the CLT. The cons, again, you've got a longer lead-in period, but that's only a con if you don't plan for it. Also with the program, as Dave has alluded to, water management. So if you as a client can work with the team to actually program your entire job around the when the CLT can be erected, if we can get it erected spring, summer months, and work everything back from there, that's a great way to do it. So really, those are probably the main cons. Again, it's time in pre-construction, and that's only a con if you don't use it.
Okay, really helpful. Have you got anything to add to that?
I think on a positive, it obviously eliminates wet trades, and you know, there's certainly, in terms of just what Keith said, productivity can be increased substantially if well if well engineered and well planned. I think that they are cons, and I think the panels pick those up in terms of you do need to plan what you're doing from the outset. It does need early fixity in terms of its integration with other products. That is key. And I think in the more major project sector, its scale and usage is a con at the moment in terms of the use of mass timber. But I think hopefully in time that will reduce. And yeah, just picking up everyone's point on water management and protective measures, that is a con, and it does need to be well thought through at the early stages through procurement and planning of the work.
Great. Okay, thanks, Graham. Okay, it's a good summary, good start. Time for our poll. Ollie, do you want to introduce our poll?
Yeah, absolutely, Matt. Thanks a lot. Probably not the most important election we've got in the next 48 hours, but let's do it anyway. What do you believe to be the biggest challenge to achieving best practice in construction when using mass timber? You can only tick one of these, please. Is it mitigating risk of fire during construction? Is it competent designers? Is it preventing water ingress? Is it main contractor experience? Is it shared learnings? Is it clear and consistent guidance? We'll just give it a few seconds whilst everybody clicks one of those, please.
Pleased to see that people are using the chat function as well. That's good. So we've got some questions coming in that I'll try and weave in as we go through. Drum roll.
And the answers are 7% of the audience think mitigating risk of fire during construction. A whopping 34% think competent designers, which is interesting given some of the sessions we've had so far. 15% believe it's preventing water ingress. 22% believe it's main contractor experience. 7% believe it's shared learnings. And 15% believe it's clear and consistent guidance. Thanks everyone for voting.
Great, that's really interesting, and it leads quite nicely into our next question actually. So how important is BIM and MMC when working with mass timber? Graham, can I ask that of you first, just linking into the questions there as well, the poll question? That's quite interesting.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, I think BIM and digital engineering are actually support the mass timber market and supply chain very well. I think they're able to provide good information to the design teams and also their interface with other trades. So I think from a BIM perspective, they are equipped to support the design team and contractors and the integration that's required with other specialist contractors. I think as far as mass timber is concerned, it certainly does support the drive to modern methods of construction. As I think I said earlier, I think its primary issue at the moment is its usage and scale and what it's being used for to date. But I think in its development, it clearly is a great product.
Steve, do you want to add anything?
Yes, I mean, the BIM piece for us is a sort of fundamentally key activity, and I think the CLT mass timber world really allows it to shine. It's an architecturally exposed product in most of its use, and actually, as Louisa picked up earlier, design coordination is absolutely key. The visualization of that the BIM tools bring to the table is even, is an extra powerful sort of element that actually allowing clients and sort of developers, architects to understand exactly what they're getting, what it's going to look like before it's too late, before you miss your design freeze and you lock in design issues that people don't want. So for me, the BIM is a key part. It gets that communication very upfront and very clear. From an MMC perspective, I think the theme that's already developing out of this conversation is that mass timber just follows the same sort of protocols that you need to follow on any MMC project. Early engagement, clients need to understand the change in cash flow. So actually, it is another component part of the MMC catalogue, and its use is therefore follows that route, and we just need to make sure people understand the architectural intent of it.
Great, thanks. That's a good summary. Thank you for that. The key considerations for main contractors during the construction phase specifically, Louisa, do you want to summarise those for us? Yeah,
I must admit, I think everyone's picked them up really well so far. But it starts with a really well programmed, installation and ensuring everyone understands the interfaces. We've got a really good lifting plan. But then it's also some of the, the ancillary things which we've already spoken about as well, whether it's water management, but ensuring that we understand the pressure treatments, how they can or can't be protected, that we really understand any fire breaks, their locations, so we program them in properly. The cladding, in my view, should generally be programmed as early as possible, really understanding proximity of other buildings and how our logistics work around that. Any detection we required both in, our temporary fire strategy and our permanent fire strategy, but really there's very little that we don't need to pick up in any sort of build or frame. So to me, it's business as usual, but just understanding it's an offsite solution, which gets us an enclosed building quickly, and allows our building services installers to work in a really lovely, clean environment, without interfacing with concrete often.
Just to clarify that, the cladding piece going on as early as possible from a water management perspective?
From a water management perspective, from a protection perspective, yeah.
Okay. David, anything to add to that?
Not too much. I mean, water's the biggest thing, I think, and how we manage water. And we've touched on it several times, and it's no surprise that everyone keeps mentioning it. So it's just something that needs such careful thought and planning. For a small building, there's probably some creative things you can do with a small footprint to keep the water off. The bigger footprint, you're faced with a different challenge. You can't cover it, so you need other creative and robust ways to get rid of your water. That for me is the biggest thing during construction. People have touched on the other interfaces and fire. Fire never really crops up as a big issue for us during construction. It's just not really a big consideration during construction. Yeah, you think about it, but it never. Or you consider it in your temporary fire plans, but it never throws anything out that you wouldn't have had otherwise.
Okay.
What is the bigger issue?
That's interesting. So in terms of fire protection during construction, comparing that with other technologies, we've had this debate already in our warm-up sessions with you, but just for the purposes of the audience, Graham, how does it compare on a fire protection basis?
I think clearly mass timber has inherent fire resistance and has finished properties. If anything, it certainly limits any site applications and negates some secondary protective measures. So I think we do have a well-established process for production of fire plans. There's clear guidance, whether that be health and safety guidance or specific timber guidance. So I think it is well thought through, and I think the review of fire protection is something that is well established in the industry, and considering both general and process fire protection is normal practice, as others have said. And clearly ignition sources, combustible material or flammable material needs to be considered appropriately with a timber structure. But I think, as I say, that is business as usual for us.
Keith, anything to add on that, Keith?
I think, in general, as everybody else has said, there's really no difference in how we would manage a site, whether it was timber or not. The Structural Timber Association has a good 16-point guide of how to manage fire on a CLT project, but it's not really any different than if it was a steel project or anything else. Now, I would have to say, I would add in on two of our current projects, we have actually found issues, not so much around site issues, but in terms of the varnishes and stains that are specified to go on to the product afterwards. Whenever we had looked in and checked, has the fire resistant varnishes and stains, have they actually been tested on glulam or on CLT? We've actually found in the market at the minute, they haven't been. The testing that goes on at the minute in accordance with British standards on very small pieces of timber. So we have now had to go and push our CLT partners to get actual tests done, because obviously in post-Grenfell world, we need real tests. I think that's something that just with time will work itself through as manufacturers do these tests, but it's just something to be aware of on any CLT project that you have going on or coming up, to look into that issue.
That's great. I mean, our insurance panel picks up on security measures and the like as well. I mean, that links in with the 16 steps that you mentioned as well. So that's a good guide for our audience to link into. Okay, we've mentioned water quite a bit so far. So do you need to consider the effects of water ingress during construction more so when working with mass timber than other materials and technologies, and why? Steve, do you want to pick that one up? Also, whilst we're on that, we've had a question in from Tom Crawley, one of the audience members, and his question relates to is the water management ever let as a separate package? So maybe you want to pick that up as well during your answer.
Yep, certainly. I mean, the procurement of water management as a separate package for me is kind of project specific. It depends on how that project chooses to run its logistics setup. You know, in-house, put it out to a supply chain partner. It's sort of, the options are there. I think in terms of from my perspective, actually, because it is quite a critical part of the process, having it controlled in-house, having it controlled with your own team is the better way of doing it, because actually what you want is a rapid response if you ever need it. You need the flexibility of how you employ it. You know, it rains at weekends, you can't stop that. It rains overnight, and as much as we'd love to sort of, you know, shut the doors at night and leave the project till the following day, you can't. So there is a period whilst that frame is in construction that you need to be responsive. And again, it's my opinion, but it's a lot easier to do that when you run it with your own people. You know, it's a logistics response. The question you'd asked was, I mean, yes, we need to consider the effects of water in the process. It's been talked about a lot already. I think the two sort of key things for me are about understanding your product and understand how it goes together. CLT is a very different product to you know, non-mass timber, so sort of stitched panels and things like that. It does have an ability to shed water, and what actually you're more considering about is how you don't trap that water in the project. You don't want to create ponds, you don't want to create sort of systems where you then have to deal with it. You want it to naturally leave the building. Picking up what they do in Germany, for example, Germany don't have flat roofs on their CLT products. If they've got a timber product, it's never a flat roof. It naturally sheds. Not laid to falls insulation and things like that. The timber is built to shed its own water. So I think there's quite a key understanding of how your building goes together there that will design out, just sort of sequence out your water problem. Obviously, everybody would like to put a roof on, but I suspect if anybody that's working in London and the southeast, the proximity of a railway line will probably, limit what you can get away with in terms of putting a roof on. But it's certainly a European trait. So yeah, it needs to be considered. But as been picked up by the other panelists, actually, good quality site management is the answer to all of these questions, really.
You picked up on a lot there, where Louisa picked up on cladding going on as soon as possible, if possible. One of the other panelists picked up on seasonal construction, if possible. We've had a question in actually on what's preventing you covering the whole building for water ingress reasons, and you've touched on it there that it's logistics and tight sites sometimes will prevent that. So that's quite helpful. Quite helpful summary. Do you ever put any sacrificial layers in, for example, or anything like that, Steve?
Yeah, and I think again it does go about understanding your product. So it was alluded to somewhere else, but actually when you speak to your manufacturers, they will protect joints, they will varnish and seal up end grain, exposed end grains, which are your weakest, the weakest points. I think one of the key considerations is that on a city, you know, as every building, every floor at some point in that process is your roof. So the water will land on it and need to be shed off it. So certainly at the black and white building, we've got sacrificial waterproofing layers at various points just to give us that bit of time to move the next trade in. So when you actually get to the roof. So, but yes, again, it all comes down to getting your logistics and sequence right. Louisa picked up on getting the facade done. You don't want to build your timber frame. You don't want to build your timber frame too quickly. You're better off starting late, finishing early, and then being able to move your following trades straight on. So actually, yeah, again, understanding your program, understanding your logistics is absolutely key.
Okay, thank you. So last one on water then. So ultimately, water will find a way in, I guess. So emergency measures to deploy to remove it. I guess there must be some that you're deploying, David, on Google or other projects. Not that specific project per se, but there must be measures that are there as an emergency backup measure for when the, you know, as a fail-safe.
Yeah, sure. As we all know, it's inevitable water will get in. So no matter what you do in the temporary state, at some point you're going to get water in, and just depends on your shape of your building and what you're able to set up logistically. But yes, you will get water in. And I think the thing to realize is, yes, one of the other panelists mentioned it, is know your product. And, you know, mass timber is not maybe as sensitive as other timber items or products. So that's not to say, if you, the very quick answer is, if you get water in, get rid of it as soon as possible. And that, you know, does mean probably using vacuums to get rid of it. What other people have said is, you know, again, comes back to that piece about what you do in design early on. But, you know, I really like the idea of maybe a slight fall or a means of the water escaping by itself without having to put people on it to get rid of it. But to answer this specific question, once there's water on it, just get rid of it as quickly as you can. Avoid sweeping it down the end grain, because that's the weak point. Just get it out of there as soon as you possibly can. However, that's not to say, Matt, that, you know, you get a significant amount of water on the thing and it can't be there for several hours, and the whole product's destroyed. It doesn't work like that. There's more, you know, it's more resilient than that.
And is there any artificial sort of drying methods or anything that people use, or literally get rid of it and let it dry?
It depends again what stage of the project you're at. But yeah, you can use fan heaters, but typically you're doing that when you're up at the top and about to put waterproofing layers down. When you're still in construction, you're doing floor plates and got a lot to still come above it. That can, you know, that can see. I think you're only really going to win with those once you're near their end and you're getting sealed up, or you're about to, it's right at the top and you're about to seal with waterproofing. To try and do that in the interim, you know, you're going to have fan heaters all over the place, and it's just going to keep raining and the water's going to keep coming, and I don't know how much you're going to achieve.
Okay. All right. So we've got fire and water as issues. Acoustics is often mentioned as an issue with mass timber. And so, Steve, have you experienced any difficulties in achieving acoustic frequency requirements, etc., with mass timber, particularly as it's an exposed product more often?
Yeah. Again, there's obviously very strong themes coming through this conversation. One of them is about knowing your product, sorry. And I think one of the things that was good to see on the poll question about design resource and design coming up as a key factor, and I think that's entirely correct, because the way the UK market at the moment uses CLT, uses mass timber, is an exposed architectural response. It celebrates its material, which is great. It creates a fabulous building But one of the things you therefore have to understand is that acoustic performance everywhere else is dealt with by layering and isolation. If you want to create a more robust acoustically performing building, you normally cover it in a layer of plasterboard and then another layer of plasterboard. The two things are contradictory. So it's about understanding what you're trying to achieve and where you're trying to achieve it, and actually getting the sort of mass timber suppliers involved at an early stage, making sure you understand your response frequencies, the mass of your product. Otherwise you will end up chasing these things through and creating a sort of incoherent design detail just to cover things up at the end without getting there. It's probably worth picking up on some of the procedures, some of the activities that tend to happen in other countries, and how we procure CLT and timber frame suppliers. Most of the procurement we've seen is that it will come out as part of the tender package. The contractor will then select a supplier and bring them forward as part of a design development piece. It is quite common, continental Europe, Australia certainly do it, that actually the client developer team will procure that timber frame upfront first and make it a named subcontractor and actually bring it in, because they get that early engagement at the right point when the design is in stage 1, stage 2. So that early engagement piece again is absolutely key to understand the limitations and the product.
Right. I mean, you're right. I mean, for all of the panels that you run, the early engagement piece on whatever aspect it may be, whether it be a supplier or insurer or whatever, and indeed the competency part has been a key theme throughout all of this, the design aspect of it. So looking forwards, what do you think is needed to improve best practice in construction when working with mass timber in particularly the UK market? So if I can ask Graham that question.
Yeah, I think from my experiences on major projects, certainly the best practice learning, particularly with the hybrid elements of structures we're seeing, is that understanding across and feedback to clients, quantity surveyors and designers on how that is to be procured and the logic to which that is seen to be a best practice solution. I think, there are a number of projects in the market at the moment using hybrid elements, and I think they need to go through the sausage machine, and out of that we need to look at what are the best options to procure both materials, as Steve says, for early design integration, and what the best assembly methods are to give us the best program. I think there are some challenges there at the moment, and we all need to understand those and share best practice.
Great, thanks. Louisa, anything to add on that?
I think it's events like this are very useful. There've been a number of events that we've had people attending, again, similar to this. And I think the more people know the truth rather than the myth, the better for all of us. And to continue with forums, particularly to get our early careers people to understand it in every walks of the job. So probably more of things like this, more of interfacing.
Education, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Education, good, both in-house and external networking.
Great. Okay, Steve, anything to add on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Education and understanding is absolutely key. In the right hands, in the right use, the whole mass timber piece creates some fabulous buildings. One thing that I think the industry, the whole of our industry, is bad at, that's from design stage, client stage, and contractors as well, is not listening. Actually, the suppliers, the specialist contractors, know how to do this. They've got lots of experience, and yet time and time again we tell them what to do. So actually I think it's turning that system around and making sure that the suppliers are influencing our decisions at an early point, and we're responding accordingly. I think we'll get a far greater efficient sort of proactive response by doing that, rather than trying to bolt them on at the end.
That's a
really interesting questions come through from Andy Cox on maybe the need to educate all of the suppliers and the subcontractors around the main contract, which the guys are all picking up on, which I think is an interesting idea and concept.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so Well, we've touched on a bit of it in terms of international. Steve mentioned some international experiences there. What can we learn from international projects regarding both procurement and on-site works best practice? Anything to add, Graham and David? So we start with Graham on that one. You're on mute, Graham.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, certainly from my perspective, I think, and Steve alluded to it, you know, detailing the climate in other countries and its use needs to be considered in terms of what we put forward in the UK. And, you know, certainly that may prevent some of the issues that Dave was talking around and we've all talked around in terms of water management and water ingress. So I think detailing and how we copy over or we look at other details is, I think, is what we could learn from abroad. Certainly that prevents rot or, you know, condensation issues and compatibility of material issues in the future. So I think that's something we need to consider in the way that we take mass timber forward.
David, you want to come in?
Sure, I'll jump in there. In one of the, following the last sustainability sessions, in one of the follow-up sessions we had, it was spoken of that one of the Swedish panelists mentioned, I think, you know, don't quote me exactly, but, you know, it was something on the lines of, you know, you've actually done so much CLT in the UK already. Why do you keep looking outside to solve the problems where you've got this wealth of information? And I think that's a very astute comment. And it's forums like this, and, you know, probably building on from this, that we take this, you know, this vast knowledge we have. Yes, definitely look at other practices outside that can improve what we do. But we've got to remember, you know, the UK, it has its own nuances and the way we set up contracts and the way we contract people. And it's not the same as elsewhere, and we're not going to just suddenly change the way the whole pieces are contracted. We can try, and maybe that's a good idea, but we've got to work with what we have and the vast amount of knowledge we actually have here in the UK, take some lessons from outside, and use them to streamline how we do things, because I think, you know, we do have a lot of know-how here. So it's just tapping into it and making sure, as you know, as always, and it's a really frustrating thing with us as a construction industry, whenever we start a new project, it's almost like we start from the beginning again. And like we've never done it before, and we use a little bit of knowledge from so-and-so and there, and we don't have sort of a unified thing we're drawing, with a pool of information we're drawing from, and that's guiding us best. That would really help.
Cool. Okay. Well, guys, that's fantastic. We've actually finished the main Q&A on time. It must be because we're all constructors, which is good. So well done. No LADs are levied there. So we'll just go on to the live questions. We've had loads of live questions. So apologies if we don't answer your question now, but we will answer them through our report in the normal way, and the panelists will pick them up afterwards. But one that is particularly interesting, I think, for me anyway. John Curran has raised this one. Because the structure itself features so prominently in the design of many timber buildings, and yet timber is an organic natural material, how do you manage visual consistency, architects and clients' desires as related to that? I can see Keith nodding there. Keith, do you want to come in on that one?
Yeah, it's a very good question. It's actually very much like how you deal with visual concrete as well. You've got to have the conversation with the design team and with the architect first, and you have to realize it is a natural product. It will not all look the same. And actually what we alluded to already in terms of weathering, that can be a big deal. So those sort of questions have to be discussed, and there has to be with the client a level of understanding of what we're likely to see, but also then dealing with the manufacturer to work out, well, what actually can we do? You can, obviously it's timber, you can sand back, etc. But even that is difficult. We had one very almost funny thing that happened to us on some glue lamb that came in. The subcontractor very helpfully had wrapped it in plastic to keep the water out, but he had wrapped it with tape with his own name on it. So whenever we took all the plastic off, the timber had all faded, except for this little strip that said his name all the way around the timber. So that was a moment of mirth. So it was on the building site. But again, it's just about talking. It's about talking up front.
Great. We've got time for one more question, actually, one more live question. I've had another good one, actually, from Graham Lewis. The panel's recommendation is to ensure the relevant package is fully detailed to enable best procurement of the package. There is thus a tension between the need for a well-developed design and early contractor engagement to ensure buildability. How does the panel consider this can be best managed from a client perspective through early contractor engagement when such detail is not available? Who wants to pick that one up? That's a great question. Any nods? David?
Yeah, I'll certainly have a go. It's something we attempted at Google, but I think the time that we had to procure everything made it difficult. But you know, probably the most traditional way in the UK would be to go for a PCSA, where you do get your supply chain partner on board early and get them inputting into the design from a very early stage. And of course, that has its own difficulties or issues in terms of competitiveness down the line. But I think, you know, maybe we get a bit too hung up on competitiveness sort of at the later stage, and maybe we are really just best, you know, there's no, and it's hard to put a figure on, because we'll always, you know, contractors will intuitively say, you know, the more you design up front, the more it saves you down the line. But we probably never really calculate how much that saving actually is, because no one really bothers with that, because it's all happened, and why do it? But I think that's really the key way to do it. Just decide who your supply chain partner is, go with them, and get them to develop the design and the detailing along with the design team, and get it done really, really early, so that when you are actually locked into contract, that's all resolved, and you know, you just don't have blockers on design that holds up manufacture.
Great. Okay, thank you for that. Like I say, we've had loads of questions in, so what we'll do, we'll send those to the panelists afterwards, and we can answer those and wrap those up in our report in the normal way, as we've done with the previous panels. I asked this question on every panel, and I just want to make sure that we cover it here, so I've just got time for that for a few minutes. What do you think the future is? What do you think the future of mass timber construction in the commercial office sector is? Just to put it out there to all of you, I don't know who wants to pick that up first, but in a few words, how do you see the future of this sector?
Well, I'll pick it up. I would say that this we are seeing it growing. So we are, obviously there is a great benefit in terms of low embodied carbon. So we can see why that is going to be taken forward and going to be attractive to our clients going forward. So we see the industry expanding.
Yeah, and in fact, I hope it expands. I think for those points, I think from a sustainability point of view, it's a fantastic product. And there's loads of other advantages if you do get early involvement and plan it properly. So I hope it grows.
Great. Anyone else before we wrap up? Steve?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's interesting is obviously we face the new normal of working environment. Luring people back to the office is going to be a challenge. I think it's fair to say that a mass timber building has an appeal, a softness, an environment that is more appealing than battery farmed rows of desks in a white box. So actually there is, I'd like to certainly think that there is, a sort of human well-being demand that the buildings can respond to.
Yeah, that links in well with our sustainability panel, where we picked up the well-being piece and the fact that people like being around timber, they feel good around timber, and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, absolutely. Cool. Okay. Guys, Louisa, team, everyone there, that's fantastic. Really thank you very much for the insights there. We've covered a lot there. So water management, obviously a key one, the interfaces, fire, which we've been through before, but again, accentuated here, which has been great. I think the two bits that come out for me on here were probably the early engagement piece. And again, as repeated on other panels, the competency part has been a massive piece as well. So thank you very much for your time, and we'll finish off with the other questions and wrap up a report, and we'll send that out as well. So that's great. Thank you all very much. So our next panel will be the G&T show. So that's going to be myself, Steve Bennett, Jess Pennell in my team, Paul Robinson in my team, who's a planning and logistics expert, and of course Ollie. So that should be a great one. That's on the 1st of December, cost, programme and procurement. So we're really looking forward to that. It's going to be, it leads on well from the discussion we've just had, and indeed from the other panels we've had, and is a good linking piece to the ones we're going to have after. So we're really looking forward to that, and I hope you can join us. As ever, please don't forget to send any aims, objectives, questions for that session to the address on the screen now, so masstimber@gardiner.com. That way we can shape the session for you. We're obviously away drafting that session now, but as ever, we want you to shape it, and any questions you want to raise, we can then weave into that that session. Okay, I think that's just about it. Lastly, thanks again, everyone. Thank you all to the audience for your support, and you know, we've had some great messages through on how well people are receiving the forum, so thank you for that. And if you know of your colleagues haven't had time to join us this morning, then don't forget to let them know there'll be a link coming out so that they can watch it at their leisure. Okay, thank you everyone, thanks for your time, and see you next time.